Right. The Co-op Live Arena, or as you just
The
called it, the Co-op Dead Arena.
Co-op
It's
Dead Arena. Yeah,
it's a Netflix documentary waiting to happen.
it's
It's
like Fire Festival, isn't it?
yeah, it does draw instant comparisons to Fire Festival.
Yeah, it's. So I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, and if you don't know, what have you been doing? It's like the biggest music story of the last kind of week. But there's been for I don't know what a good 2 years now. They've been constructing this great big live arena next to the Etihad in Manchester, and finally it's kind of gotten to open, and shit has just hit the fan in a kind of massive way.
The
Um,
ventilation for
well, yeah, is it even there? Has it been installed? Is it hanging off the ceiling?
so this for context is a 23.5k capacity arena
Yeah,
in a
the
city
biggest
which
biggest one in Europe, is it?
yeah, biggest one in Europe. But for like background, Manchester does not need this. Like
No, Manchester
it,
definitely doesn't need it. There's the AO Arena,
yeah,
which is a perfectly serviceable arena size gig. It's standard arena size. It's nothing special, but it's an arena gig. And
yeah,
it is pretty much slap bang in the middle of town. You know, it's really accessible, right next to the tram stop, surrounded by pubs. It is sort of a pretty ideal location for a venue like that. But Co-op have decided to build this great big new thing.
yeah. And the thing with AO Arena, it's a lot bigger than other UK arenas generally. So
Yeah.
a lot of times bands can't play that size. If they're doing, say, an arena tour of smaller arenas, they'll do a couple of nights at Victoria Warehouse, maybe just because that
Mhm.
arena's a bit bigger and they wouldn't fill the seats, usually is the case. So there's absolutely no need for it. And it's City Football Group who are behind it, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Which is linked to Man City. I think they've got an American consulting company involved as well.
Something like that. Some venture capitalists getting involved.
Uber
And it
capitalist death
was
trade.
yes, yeah, good old Cabbage. So there
Always love a
was
cabbage
it's
reference.
yeah, what a band. I really like Cabbage. I'm sad that they're no longer on the scene. But 350 million pounds, 350 million pounds on something that is fundamentally unfinished
Yeah.
is, I would say, an absolute disaster. Like,
Yeah.
which could you call it anything less than that?
No, well, before it opened or for its preview gig, I drive past it sometimes on the way to football or dropping my friends off like
Mm.
Ardwick and Coates way. And it was it was still building outside. Like, and I said, so my mate was like, "No, it's opening like in a couple of weeks." I was like, "That does not look like it's opening."
Yeah, so I've kind of put down a little timeline of events here.
Mm.
So the 22nd of April, that is when Rick Astley does the test event. This goes ahead at a reduced capacity of 11,000, and they had to cancel some of those tickets on the night. So immediately there was an incident where, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, I couldn't find out why online, but the test event was already at a reduced capacity. Like it had already kind of not worked. And it's 23.5K. You're looking at less than half of that for this Rick Astley gig, which as far as I know, seems to be quite good. I like Rick.
Mm.
Um, and then the next day, Peter Kay was supposed to do a couple of shows there. Do you remember Peter Kay? Who remembers Peter Kay? And so on and so forth. Um, that they were cancelled. They were like immediately pulled because the power testing, whatever the fuck that is, had failed. Uh, they were moved to the 29th and the 30th of April.
Mhm.
And then, like the same day, the executive director, Mr. Gary Roden, takes a swipe at smaller venues, saying that they are poorly run and calls the ticket levy, which we spoke about last time on this podcast,
Mm.
too simplistic. He seems to be the only person I have noticed going against it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is funny. And Black Keys got cancelled as well shortly after. Oh, but that was
Yeah.
rearranged shortly after Peter Kay. And
So on
they,
the 27th, the Black Keys gig is
yeah,
pushed to the 15th of May.
yeah. But
Um,
before that, people who had lost out to the Rick Astley gig
mm,
had been offered tickets to go to Black Keys, and
had they?
immediately, yeah. So immediately that you think they're a bit out of touch here because why would someone who likes Rick Astley well enough to go to a gig be then delving into like El Camino? There's
I think, I mean, I'm sure there is some
no
crossover,
100%, but to assume that that they'll just accept that as like as a way to fill some seats for the Black Keys is just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? And then, so the Music Venue Trust then kind of fired back at Roden and Co-op Live. They said that their comments were disrespectful and disingenuous, which
Mm.
I have to agree with. You know, they're bang on there.
Mhm.
Subsequently, Roden then resigns. He leaves the building. He kind of just sort of sets fire to everything, shits the bed, and then is like, "Yep, see you later, guys. That's me done."
I always
um,
think of that meme where it's the girl and everything burning in the
yeah, yeah.
background.
Or is it Donald Glover where he walks into the room holding pizzas and like everything's on fire? I think it might be from
Yeah.
Community, maybe. And then further to that, the 1st of May, there is a gig scheduled for a rap artist called A Boogie with Da Hoodie, who is not someone that I'm familiar with.
No.
But that gig is cancelled less than an hour after the doors have opened. So people got into Co-op Live Arena, and you can have a look at this on Twitter. You know, have a look at just search it and you'll see. But the place looks like a shambles. It looks like it's about to be condemned rather than about to open. There's like
Yeah.
wires hanging off of the ceiling. There's stuff everywhere. There's boxes. There's like wood and plasterboard and stuff just lying about. It is insane.
Yeah.
And there's a
Great
good
for his PR
article.
though, isn't it?
Well,
Because nobody
I
had
mean,
heard of him who I've spoken to before
no,
this.
no, I hadn't. And that gig has since been, along with the Take That shows, moved over
No.
to the already perfectly serviceable AO Arena.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was a good article on the BBC about this and this Boogie with the Hoodie. I feel like I'm saying that in such a white guy way. Boogie with the Hoodie. Boogie with the
Boogie with a
Hoodie.
hoodie. Boogie with a
Boogie with a
hoodie.
Hoodie. Oh, I don't know.
It's a terrible name.
um,
It's an awful name.
it's not great, but there's some good quotes on this gig on this article, right? You know, people saying the VIP rooms are full of like cardboard boxes and are very clearly unfinished. They're filled with workmen who are still busy doing loads of sort of checks. There's lots of wires hanging down everywhere. Many of the stairways seemed incomplete. There was exposed lighting on the floor. It looked very messy. There are gaps in the stairs. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
crazy. You know, there's like I just don't get it. But then
No.
something that I saw written on the NME by a friend of mine, Tilly Folks, they wrote this really good article kind of touching on this and talking about it, but also emphasizing how there will be staff who were booked to work that gig, that Boogie with that Hoodie gig, who will almost certainly be on 0 hours contracts, earning minimum wage, and they will have had to incur travel expenses to get there to work at this gig that has just been kiboshed before a note has even been played. And that is not on the people who work there, who have those 0 hours contracts. And they are fundamentally the ones who are losing out, because I can't imagine they'll have got paid for their time.
No. And they've kind of, what the words they've said are component of the heating and ventilation system separated from the ductwork. I think that was the Boogie with the Hoodie.
What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I just think it sounds like something from Phoenix Nights. Like
yeah,
something
exactly.
that would go wrong there. I don't know.
Well, hang on. Peter Kay's gigs have been rescheduled, though, haven't
they? Yeah.
But you know, you look at it. You look at this £350 million big sort of steaming pile of turd, and you're like, you know, in a city that already has loads of venues, a couple of medium to sort of large venues, and a very big arena already. And you think, you know, you could have put that 350 mil in a pot and, you know, used it as a grant funding resource for the venues that we already have, you know, the poorly run independent venues that are closing down, for Manchester bands who are, you know, like as we discussed last week with the ticket levy and stuff from Lily Fontaine from English Teacher, there are bands who are making incredible art who basically cannot afford to sustain that because of the way that the industry is. Imagine what a £350 million investment pot could do to the Manchester music scene. You could shape the scene for a decade with funding like that, and it's just been totally pissed up the wall for no good reason. And the building is really ugly. I think it's really ugly.
And the other, they're going to have to spend a whole lot more now to fix the problems.
Oh yeah,
that should have already. And it baffles me because this is linked to Man City, isn't it? In some, the City football group it's linked. It's nearby
some shit
the stadium.
like that. Yeah.
But So how does like a company who gets something so right in the football terms, they appoint the right people, they pay over the odds to get the structure of a
Mhm.
football club so perfect. Why have they not made sure that the same's done for the music thing? I
I
just
don't
don't
know.
know.
It makes no sense because if you're Man City and you're going to engage in some culture washing, you've done the sports side of it incredibly,
Yeah.
incredibly well. But like you said, Sean, they have clearly not employed the right people here because
Mm.
something that should have been pretty easy slam dunk has resulted in them becoming a laughing stock.
Yeah. And it's not only that co-op, who's obviously just sponsored the place. Their name's all over this now.
Yeah, exactly. You got to think there are some ad executives at the co-op tearing their hair out over this.
Mm.
Um, but there was right. So Mark Dave, is it David or Mark David, David perhaps? He is the head of the Music Trust, and he's got a good thread on Twitter explaining some of the events and sort of what is happening amongst this chaos and also the sort of issues that are behind the booking policy and the way that it is not necessarily in line with supporting new music, which is something that they claim to do. So I'm going to
Mm.
read some bits of Mark's thread here. So he says 21% of all the shows will be performed by artists over the retirement age. 8% of those shows will be performed by artists under the age of 30. So only 8%. 17% of the shows are performed by artists over the age of 75. Uh, Less than half of the shows will feature a headline performance by a British artist. The average age of those British artists is over 50 years old. There is not a single British artist under 30 confirmed to perform at any of the gigs that they have put on. Um, the average length of time it takes for a British artist to be booked to headline the Co-op Live Arena from the date of their first album is 30 years. You've got to be over 30 to headline the Co-op Arena. It's just absolutely terrible. And
Yeah.
what else has he said? The final thing he said is Co-op Live have publicly stated that they don't believe there are problems with the UK music talent pipeline.
Yeah. It's
I,
it's just
yeah,
all it's like as I said before, it's just a documentary waiting to happen. There's so
yeah,
many
it
little
really is. It
bits,
really
and it's
is.
not. They haven't announced a new opening date, haven't they? So
They
let me
have.
just yeah, I think so. So
Okay.
I think 14th of May. So
That's rapidly approaching. But just generally, to kind of round off this discussion on the Co-op Live, I think it is like the whole thing is so tone deaf to
mm,
me, and it smacks of total ignorance of how the music scene actually operates. And there is just no chance they have consulted anyone who is sort of on the ground, boots on the ground in the music industry, or even just
yeah.
literally just go to the Northern Quarter and just talk to someone, and they will give you sort of some opinions, some knowledge, some sense on what you should be doing here. But to say no, there's not a problem with the music pipeline, and then you've not booked a single British artist under the age of 30, to
Yeah.
say that venues who are small and are having to close down are run badly, and you've got a 350 million pound arena that is falling to pieces and hanging apart. The whole
Mm,
thing is just such a monumental mess, and it is totally and utterly unrequired. It is
no.
unneeded. Manchester does not need it.
Yep.
And
But
for
tell you
a
we'll be
music
rubbing the hands
city,
together.
you what? Sorry,
I'll tell you who'll be rubbing their hands together.
who's
The
that?
AO Arena.
The AO Arena. Well, what a resurgence for the AO Arena. Generally, somewhere that
Only
I
£8 a pint though.